The Infor Cloverleaf API Gateway provides full API management with dashboards and tools to easily build, secure, manage, and monitor your APIs. I'll start the demonstration with an overview of the dashboard and then move on to my suite of defined and pre-built APIs. I'll build and connect to an API, apply request and response policies, test, validate, and monitor my API calls. Logging into the Cloverleaf API Gateway dashboard, I'm presented with an easy to understand view, which gives me an overview of API Gateway traffic, statistics, and metrics, showing overall performance with access to successful requests and any API errors. These widgets are customizable, and more widgets are available, such as line charts showing API traffic over time. Switching into the API configuration view, I'm presented with an administration screen, showing all available and deployed API suites. Pre-built API suites are available for me out of the box, but I can build new API suites very easily from third parties such as Twitter, Salesforce, ServiceNow, as well as all the Infor applications, or easily build one, in this case to a cancer clinical trials API provided by cancer.gov. I'll provide an application name, a suite name, the API context, a description, and also an icon to complete the configuration of the suite. I will add a new target endpoint, and here's where I can provide the publicly available cancer.gov API endpoint. I'll give it a proxy endpoint location, and you'll see the publicly facing proxy endpoint changes as I type that in. I can also set my proxy security to anonymous and can apply any target endpoint security as well. Now that I've entered all configuration options, I'll go ahead and save my configuration, and to validate and test my API, I'll drill into the documentation section and add mine, in this case Swagger, but I can add others like PDF or WSDL documentation. Once I've added the documentation, I can see all the operations available on my API. I'll use the Get Clinical Trial operation and validate this by using the Try It Out button and provide a clinical trial ID. Once I hit the Execute button, I'll see my successful response and response code. And what's nice here is this is the response that you can then pull into Cloverleaf and be able to use in the JSON or XML configuration, as well as the transformation tools to do any kind of mapping to legacy systems that support HL7, V2 flat files, and so on. Now I'll apply some endpoint policies. I can apply these policies both at the endpoint level as well as the suite level, where the suite level policies will be applied to all endpoints in that suite. And here you can see all the different kinds of request policies available. I'll choose a quota limit as I want to limit the number of requests per minute to 10,000 requests. This will help me for any kind of denial of service attacks, or maybe my target endpoint can't handle more than that. And so I can quickly define this in this simple XML structure. I also want to be able to apply threat protection on my API to check for any kind of malicious code being inserted into the API request. So I'll add the regex threat protection. I'll finish my configuration here, move the threat protection before the policy quota, and save. I can also easily add policies for responses like response caching, XML JSON transformation, and so on. I'll save my API configuration, and I'll use a publicly available testing tool to do a sample request, and you can see the API gateway URL with the trial ID added in the full context. I'll create the request, and the response is just like my Swagger documentation response in JSON format. Now I'll switch over to my monitoring view. I'll search for my request, and I'll see that request come in as well as all the policies that were applied to it. And if you remember, I had two policies applied for threat protection and quota. You can see the full trace here and the flow with success or errors along the way. I can download this log if I want to as well. Now I'll switch over to my authorized apps. And these are any applications that have access and privileges to connect to the API gateway. In essence, this is limiting what devices or applications have access to my endpoints. Finally, I've built a web application that uses the API gateway in conjunction with the Infor Fire bridge to provide patient demographics. This web app sends a Fire request with the patient ID to the gateway, which communicates to the Fire bridge and thus the Fire server, returning demographic, medication, allergy, and appointment details. If I switch over to the monitoring tool, I'll see that requests come in and any kind of policies that were applied to it. And that's how the Cloverleaf API Gateway simplifies, secures, manages, and monitors your enterprise APIs.